What's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to yet another episode of the Christian Girl Podcast. I am your host, Debbie, and it's always a pleasure to be here with you. And if no one's told you this today, you are loved, you are seen, and you are enough. Not because of what you've done, but because of the one who chose you. That's right, our Father who art in heaven. Today's podcast episode is a bit tender, and I really don't know how to jump into the body of it. So I guess we're just gonna roughly jump into it. So if this was a cut, it was gonna be like a rough cut. Anyways, there's something we don't talk about enough in Christian spaces, and that is what happens when the place that was supposed to feel safe, the place that was supposed to love you, the place that was supposed to welcome you ends up hurting you. I am talking about when the people who represent God misrepresent Him, when words meant to guide you end up wounding you instead, and when instead of feeling seen, you feel judged, misunderstood, or even pushed away. Church hurt is real, and if you've experienced it from the deepest part of my heart, I genuinely want to say this. I am so sorry that you had to go through that, especially in your own father's house. You can suffer outside, but suffering in your own father's house, that is wild and definitely not right. And if you've experienced it, I am truly sorry. And I am not saying this in a dismissive way, and I'm not saying this in a, just pray about it, forgive and forget way. I am saying this from a place of personal experience. When I tell you, I feel like I was taken up by the church, crucified by the church, and literally destroyed. Yeah, I know a thing or two about what it means to be hurt by the church and about what it means to start rebuilding your view of God again after being hurt and betrayed by the church. And I feel like the reason why I am so passionate about openly speaking about the church wounds I have and the church wounds that a lot of people get is because that kind of hurt can be very, very confusing on a lot of levels. The first thing is it can make you start questioning every single person you meet. And secondly, it can make you question yourself. And one thing about questioning yourself, it brings your sanity into question, which is never fun. And when you start questioning your sanity, you also start questioning your discernment and all these things. And lastly, it can literally make you start questioning God. And I feel like that's a very, very dangerous place to be. So that is why I am truly, truly passionate about this because I have felt insane. I have felt like I don't know what the Bible is. I don't even know this God that I thought I knew simply because of the hurt and the wounds that the church gave me. I refuse to believe that people who genuinely love God, people who wholeheartedly serve God, will treat other humans as less than, or will treat other humans like you know you don't matter, or you're stupid, or you don't know what's going on, or I know better than you, things like that. Yeah, before we go any further, I just want to say that this episode is not about bashing the church, it is not about pointing fingers, and it is not about creating division whatsoever. This episode is to bring a truth that most of us don't like to admit, that most of us don't like to talk to light. And the truth is, the church is made of people, and people are imperfect beings, but also acknowledging that people are not perfect does not mean we ignore the impact that their heart and the words they spoke leave on the people who were touched or spoken to or spoken about. So, disclaimer, we are not here to bash anyone, we're simply here to learn, to feel seen, to feel acknowledged, and to know that God does see our heart and God does take it seriously, and so should we. If you were to ask me, I feel like the hard part about church heart is the fact that it just doesn't affect how you see people, it literally affects how you see God as well. And the thing is, when someone speaks on behalf of God and gets it all wrong, it can definitely blur the line between who God actually is and how he is presented to you. And the hard part of it all is the fact that if you are not careful, you can end up walking away from God because of something he didn't even do. And I say that not just as a concept, but literally, as I have just said it from experience, because it was like, God, you cannot tell me these are your people doing this to me? There have been moments in my own life where I found myself feeling more anxious than at peace in spaces that were supposed to draw me closer to God, i.e., church, and moments where I felt like I was constantly being watched, like I was being measured or corrected over things that didn't sit right with my soul. Literally felt like every step I took, people are literally there with their notebooks writing, oh, she has done this and this again. Oh, she has done this and this again. And the reason why I felt that is because I am very open about my faith. I am very outspoken about my relationship with God. And so that comes with people having mad expectations over you. So it's always like you should always be an upright standing person in every single thing you do. If you walk straight and then one day you just like trip, or that will become like the conversation of the topic. And so growing up, I concluded that being outspoken about God, being loud about God, being or rather serving in the church, because I used to sing, I used to be in the choir, I used to have a nice voice, being upfront with God, I thought that it meant being crucified by the people. My way of fixing that was stopping all of that. Stop singing, stop being seen in church, stop being loud about my faith, all that. That was like what my mind was telling me. It was like, okay, so if X equals Z, that means when you remove Z, you remove X as well. I hope that makes sense. One thing that has been helping me out as a grown up now is asking myself, is this God or is this someone's interpretation of God, or rather someone's misrepresentation of who God actually is? And when you don't know the difference, it can definitely make you shrink who God is or who God has been in your life. It can make you second guess your own voice. It can make you second guess your own choices, even your relationship with God. You're going to be there and like, oh God, do we really have a relationship? Do we really have a close relationship? And the more I grow up, literally growing older is the key to unlocking wisdom. I will say that. Because another thing that I have realized is the fact that every single moment that I left God because of other people's voices or because of other people persecuting me, it was because I didn't fully recognize him in what I was experiencing. I detached him from my experience and I was like, oh, you've left me alone. What is this? But when we look at the Bible, we have a lot of people who were crucified because they love God. We have a lot of people who are literally also crucified by their own people. This is people from the same church, because of their relationship with God. And also another perfect example of that will be Jesus Christ. Like, Deborah, how did you not see Jesus Christ in those moments? So every single time you find yourself being crucified by the church for literally no other reason than you existing and being a child of God, it is very, very good to remember that it has nothing to do with you at all and everything to do with who the person is. Okay, now that we've covered that, let's actually go into what I have learned and what I am still learning. First things first is the fact that God is not people, and it's the fact that people can misrepresent God. People can add to what he does, what he didn't say. People can take away from what he did say, and people can lead from their own wounds, their own fears, and their own need to control. But God, his character remains the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So when God tells you he loves you, he doesn't mean he only loves you in moments where you're like the most perfect, the most polished version of yourself. When God says he sees you, he doesn't say he only sees the wonderful you are serving part of yourself. When God says he has chosen you, he has redeemed you, he's not saying that from like a straw or from a tunnel vision view. He's literally saying that before you were born, before you were created, before the idea, the concept of the universe came to me, I already loved you. Can we think about that for a while? There's a verse in Psalms chapter 8, verses 4 that says, what is mankind that you are so mindful of them? And I find that quote so beautiful, that verse so beautiful, because when you actually think about the bigger picture of it, is the fact that every single thing that God created gave it to us to rule over. Think about the universe, okay? Think about the entire universe. It will take us over 100,000 years to go around the Milky Way at the speed of light. And I'm trying to bring this to conception that God thought about you before He created what we think is the biggest thing ever created. God thought about you. So when God says He loves you, I think it's so unfair not to believe that He does, because there is just so much around us that reminds us of that. And I think it's a very, very important truth to remember, especially um when we're facing wounds from the church, when we are facing being hurt from the church. It is always important to remember that number one, God is not people, and number two, God loved me, God loved you way before the universe came to be. I will forever stress the idea that God loves you even in your hardest moment, because if you don't believe that, if you don't separate God from people, if you don't separate God's love from our limited emotions or our limited measure of love, you might end up carrying offense towards God for something He never did, and you might end up building distance from Him when He's actually the safest place for you to run to. Another thing I had to learn was the fact that healing from church hurt is literally not about pretending it didn't happen. It is not about forcing yourself to just move on. It is definitely not about silencing your experience to make other people comfortable. It is about processing the situation and everything that happened while also allowing God to redefine Himself to you. And that, one thing I think that helps a lot is if you have just one person you fully trust, you feel like you connect with spiritually, you feel like you look up to them, you can talk to them about the situation. And if you are afraid, like I am, you can pray that God will send them to talk to you. True story. Something happened not so long ago at church, and it really put me down. Not gonna lie, I did not go to church for a month, I think, and I had genuinely started looking at just doing my own studies, doing online church and all that. And then I was like, okay, God, let so and so reach out. And I kid you not, they did. They reached out, they texted, and we had a really good conversation. And I was able to fully open up to them, to fully tell them how it made me feel, to fully tell them like the thoughts that were going through my mind. And it was really nice because after we spoke, I felt lighter, and I was like, you know what, God, you are the real deal. You really are the real MVP. So if you are a shy person and you cannot reach out to the person you feel like can have a thing or two to say to you, pray that they reach out to you, because it definitely works. And I understand being socially anxious. I am socially anxious, weirdly. I don't sound like I am, but we continue praying. We continue praying for God. Anyways, and I just want to say, in as much as that conversation did help me, it does take time. It really does take time to feel comfortable again in the same space, to feel comfortable again talking to the same people, or to not have, those those background voices that come when you're talking to someone. Yeah, it takes a while for those to quiet down. And that was something that I personally had to deal with. And I was like, God, I want to forgive these people. I really want to move forward with my life. I don't want to feel anxious every single time I see them. I don't want to feel like I have to hide every single time I see them. And so mine was with God. I was like, okay, God, let's make an agreement. I am coming to church to be with you. I am coming to church to serve you. I am not obligated to greet people after service. I can just run back to the car after service. And they were like, okay. The thing with that is the more you get comfortable again, you just naturally start greeting people again and go back to your old joyful self who used to enjoy being around people and serving God with other people. If you are actively going through this, if you are actively going through church wounds, church hurt, I just want to say this to you right now. It is definitely okay to take time healing. It is definitely okay to have questions, and it's 100% okay to set boundaries to protect your heart, because distance from harmful environments is not the same as distance from God. If you generally feel like the church as a whole is a problem, I'm not talking about like the church you go to, but like the body of Christ is a problem because that's what you've been exposed to throughout your life. I can just say lean on to God and ask for guidance. Lean on to God and ask for guidance, because I know that a broken heart can make hasty decisions. Like me, I was ready to never go back to any church whatsoever. But it's very important to lean to God and to remember once again that how people choose to misrepresent God is not who God is. It is not how God operates. And I know some of us might feel guilty for doing this, but one thing I really want us to remember, how many things have I said I want us to remember? The fact that God is not offended by your wounds. God is not offended by you being hurt in the church. God is not offended by your process to get through the heart. He is not offended by any of that. If anything, he actually meets you right there. Like for me, God did meet me in my heart and was like, okay, I know you're not gonna reach out to this person, so let me just send them your way. And God will meet you there. He will definitely meet you there. And one thing that helps us in life, one thing that helps us build thicker skin is learning God for yourself, not learning God through other people. One thing I realized last year was the fact that most of these Bible stories, I knew them from Sunday school, but I had never really taken my time to actually read through and learn about them. And so when I started, I think I started with the book of Esther. When I got all the context, all the drama, all the tea, Esther has really good drama, by the way. I was shocked at just how much I was missing out. And that was me learning God through my Sunday school teachers. But it is also very important to come to a place where we are learning God for ourselves, where we are learning God firsthand. We can do this through His Word, we can do it through prayer, we can do it through quiet moments of worship where it's just literally you and Him. My favorite thing to do is having prayer chants as I just meditate on either the word I read that day or on God, how good He is to me and how much I love Him. Sometimes when I'm thinking about how much I love God, I genuinely blush. It's crazy. Anyways, I know this is supposed to be a serious topic we're talking about, but what can I do? What can I say? I am an unserious person on a very, very serious mission, and that is to share Christ with you wherever I go. An analogy I came across a few months ago or a year or so ago is the whole fake counterfeit money versus real money. The only way you can know whether money is counterfeit or not, you need to know what original money looks like. You need to know what an original note looks like. So when you see anything that doesn't look like the original note, you will know for a fact that this is a counterfeit. Now, where am I going with this? When you start to learn God for yourself, when you start to get closer to God on a personal level, it becomes very easier to recognize when something doesn't align with his character. It becomes very easy to know when something doesn't align with what God will say. So, if someone or an environment is representing a God who does not match the character you know of God, run. And the only way you can actually know that is if you actually do know the character of God. So you will not be there like thinking to try and see whether this is God. You know, God leads with love, never with fear. He leads, He doesn't control. There's a very big difference between being led and being controlled. And God invites us to fellowship with Him, He does not force us to fellowship with Him. And I think this is something we need to tell again our African parents. It doesn't make sense punishing or beating a teenager who doesn't want to go to church. Story for another day. I mean, topic for another day, but we will revisit that one day. And when you just spend time getting to know God on a personal level, you slowly begin to rebuild trust again, not necessarily in people right away, that takes time, but in God and in His love for you, in His character, in His truth, in what He has spoken about you before anyone else had ever said a word concerning you and your life. So yeah, church hearts are very, very real. And I think it helps us as a church, it helps us as a body of Christ, it helps us as individuals when we admit that these things do happen, when we admit that sometimes people's need for control can override the need to preach God and present God in the way that God actually is. So Church hurts, they exist, they are very real. And I can almost guarantee you that in your friend group, there is at least one person who has been hurt badly by the church, but you don't know about it. Why? Because these are things we see as taboo. These are things when we try to talk about, we are told, oh, we don't listen, we don't like listening to advice. There's a very big difference between correcting someone and bashing them. There's a very big difference between trying to help someone and making them the sense of your gossip. As we come to the end of today's episode, I just want you to leave it with this. If the church has ever hurt you, I am truly, truly sorry. But don't let people's misrepresentation of God keep you from experiencing who He really is. God is still very kind, God is still very patient, and God is still our safe place. And one thing about Him, He will always be available to you, even in your most hard version self. He will always be available to you. So take your time if you must, heal at your pace if you must, but don't close your heart to God because of something He didn't do. You are allowed to rebuild yourself, to rebuild your relationship with God. You are allowed to question the church, to question the body of Christ, and you are allowed to come back not to people but to God. You are very much allowed to do that. And if your church won't have you back, we're more than willing to accept you and adopt you into our church. So, with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for spending this time with me. If this episode spoke to you, kindly share it with someone who might need it. And as always, take what resonates, question what doesn't, and keep showing up truthfully before God. And I promise you, you will never be the same again. I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.